So I want to thank the following people for also really uh, making this completely and totally possible. And that is that Brendan Horgan, who's our Chief Operating Officer, and Dr. Erica Callahan, who is running our study for us. They both were very instrumental in this original research project that we did on blood sugar handling and on why this was so important for us. And one of the reasons that we're really, really excited about what we're going to be able to do with potential power, because we realized what were the contributing factors that patients are having with their blood sugar handling and what the advice that's been out there that may not actually be correct. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that lifestyle is incredibly important on blood sugar handling. And we will be having a presentation on sleep, because sleep, of the three things for lifestyle, sleep, exercise, and diet, sleep turns out to be actually the most important because it has the most hormone impact. Exercise is the next most important because we want to actually burn both sugar and fat in exercise, and that will help us balance out our blood sugar. And we want to know that for our blood sugar handling for diet, our macronutrient balances and the importance of low glycemic index foods is the way that we're going to really be able to handle this. And because the current recommendation is that if you're going to drink or you're going to eat food, that you want to not have too many sugar grams in there, we wanted to look at the impact of non-nutritive sweeteners. And that really, I have to give Brendan a lot of kudos for his contribution to that piece of the puzzle, because he realized that when he was studying at food science at Cornell, that non-nutritive sweeteners were not doing what we expected them to do. And we cannot actually burn fat and sugar without the vitamins and minerals it takes for the mitochondria to work, so that we don't have the craving that we're thinking in the first place. And that is great. And so, and then Elizabeth is reminding me that she is going to contribute to this in the future as well, because we are going to really talk some about the microbiome, but the microbiome is critical. And so we'll have more about that in the future when we really just address the microbiome. So really that gut-brain axis, critical for all of this. And we'll see that very, very much so here. So why is sleep so important? I focus on this mostly just on growth hormone, but it actually, sleep has impact on thyroid stimulating hormone and also on the mitochondrial health. But we're focusing today on the impact of good sleep hygiene for 7 to 8 hours because of growth hormone. Growth hormone, which is made in the pituitary gland, actually is made only twice in a day, one when you're exercising and one when you're sleeping. When I have good sleep, then what happens is I make growth hormone, which goes to the liver. That's right here. And the liver makes a thing called insulin-like growth factor 1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is really important in changing the way that the muscle uses fuel. When I have growth hormone, it tells the muscle to burn fat and to spare the blood sugar for the brain and the red blood cells. Additionally, it tells the muscle to make muscle mass, and it helps amino acid uptake. So when I actually want to gain muscle mass, when I want to burn fat, it's absolutely essential to have growth hormone. And again, you're only making it twice. You're making it when you're sleeping and you're making it when you're exercising. So you really want to make sure that you're doing both of those things, because that's how we're going to get that real impact on our muscle mass. The other thing is that we know that a lot of times when people are trying to get rid of and keep their blood sugar down in an environment where I'm stressed out, And now my glucose is not getting in because cortisol blocks the GLUT4 transporter in muscle tissue. We do know that there is a hormone independent pathway that if we contract our muscles by walking, by weight-bearing exercise, that even 30 minutes a day is going to bypass the hormone-dependent glucose transporter, and even in insulin resistance will allow this sort of backdoor way that when calcium comes in, it runs a different pathway. And so now I can actually start to lower my blood sugar just by walking. So that's a really important thing, and why it's so important to get up and move. And so even going back and forth to the mailbox, walking around the house, anything where I doing some weight bearing exercise, as soon as I use calcium to contract my muscle, that will help bring that glucose in an insulin independent pathway. So why do we even care about this? What is the prevalence? This, I just updated this slide because when I wrote this slide a few years ago, and I did this presentation the very first time in maybe 2018, and here we are 6 years later, the latest data from the NHANES research is only from 2021. But in 1990, only 3.5% of patients actually had diabetes. By 2008, 7.9%. 2012, 8.3. In 2021, we're up to 11.6%. That means you have 10 people in front of you, one of them has diabetes. Never mind that that they just have insulin resistance and they have metabolic syndrome. We really now are at a real epidemic here. And so this is causing a massive impact on everyone at this point where we have that many. This is full out diabetes, yes, not just pre-diabetes. This is actual diagnosed diabetes, 11.6% of the population in 2021. Now we can see just by looking at the data, it's going up. So at 2024, we could be at 12, 13 for sure. So what happens is that even as of 2021, on this paper that is the most recent paper I could find, 38.4 million Americans have diabetes. 2 million of those have type 1 or insulin, they're not insulin resistance, true lack of insulin, type 1 diabetes. And that includes 304,000 children and adolescents. They think, though, there might be another 29.7 million or another 8.7 million that actually have not been correctly diagnosed. So this is just really a huge, huge problem. The reason that we should care so much about that is that diabetics were really the group that suffered the most in the COVID crisis, because diabetes both makes you hypertensive and damages the blood vessel walls. And that's how the COVID virus enters, through the blood vessel walls. Even though it comes in through the lung, it goes in through the walls of the blood vessels. And so because diabetics have narrowed blood vessels, they're more likely to have increased morbidity and mortality than any other group. So you would think, because it came in through the airway, that asthmatics would be the most at risk, but that isn't true. It was really the diabetics that had the most problems. We know that diabetes is caused by diets high in refined carbohydrates, not just diabetes, but cardiovascular disease, because diabetics have the highest risk of cardiovascular disease. Cancer is a hormone-related disease as well. And in diets high in refined carbohydrates, the white blood cells are kind of like the barn cat. The white blood cells are supposed to be recognizing those cancer cells that we're making every day, and they're supposed to be recognizing them that they're not us, and they're supposed to be taking them out. By the macrophages are supposed to be really digesting them, so to speak, and getting rid of the cancer. But when my blood sugar is high, our white blood cells that are immune cells they're like getting fed by the sugar, and they're like, well, why should I eat bacteria? So my immune system is depressed, and why should I fight the cancer cells? This is quite well documented, so it's really a huge problem. And then, of course, having cavities, and then obesity is now understood that that's coming first, and that can lead to those tumors that you get with cancer, to the diabetes, and then to the heart disease. So really, we want to focus really on that weight gain. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is how are we going to get that weight gain under control. So what they know is that when I have this, what this person has here, what's called central adiposity, when we put fat in our belly, it is not putting stuff in the garage and we're just forgetting about it. That is not what is happening. Adipose tissue turns out to be very metabolically active. What it's making are these inflammatory and anti-inflammatory cytokines. And you want to think of adipose tissue much more like an Amazon warehouse, where things are coming and going, and not like your garage where you're just throwing the junk in there, closing the door, and never looking at it again. That is not what's happening. And what's happening as well is that we want insulin, which is released in response to increased blood sugar by our pancreas. We want that insulin to put the glucose into the cells. And the two cells that insulin puts glucose into is muscle and adipose. But when I have central adiposity, my cortisol level goes up. And when my cortisol level goes up, it blocks the glucose 4 transporter in muscle preferentially. This is why exercise is so important, so that the muscle can use the back door. If I block the glucose 4 transporter in muscle tissue, now the only place that that glucose can go is into adipose. When it goes into adipose, what it does is it stores fat. So if I have high saturated fat foods and I have high glucose at the same time, that is actually going to be the thing that's going to cause the most central adiposity. And this is why when they say, oh, you should avoid fat, it's not so much the fat. If I'm eating fat that's coming with protein, which is called a high fat, low carbohydrate diet, that has the best literature for maintaining your body composition. Now we have a high fat, high carbohydrate diet. Now I'm going to both make fat and store fat. And so that is going to be how I'm really going to have this body type, where it's not everywhere. It really is in this more central adiposity region. So what happened was that in type 2 or insulin resistance, health professionals were saying, you know what, the way we're going to get your sugar under control is we're going to have you do non-nutritive sweeteners, because non-nutritive sweeteners will not raise your blood sugar. That's what they said that you're going to do. But by 2012, they're like, that seems like maybe not the best advice. We better have that used judiciously. Here is the problem, though. 86% of Americans are currently using low-calorie, reduced sugar, or sugar-free foods and beverages. And in the US, the 3 most common sugar substitutes are the yellow, the blue, and the pink. And so we have then the saccharins, the pinks, and the blue, which is NutraSweet, which can also be called equal. And then we have Splenda, which is sucralose. So the issue with that is, what are they doing? It turns out that there was a great study in 2014 where they took non-nutritive sweeteners and they actually looked at a thing called interleukin 6. And what they found is that when I compare non-nutritive sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose and saccharin, and I compare them to white sugar or brown sugar or molasses, and here's my control over here, I find that all the non-nutritive sweeteners reduce interleukin 6. Highly significant, p less than 0.001. Now, normally we think of the interleukins as inflammatory cytokines. And so you would think, hey, that might be good to have a reduced level of interleukin 6. Here we see that here's the control group, molasses is increasing it, white and brown sugar is increasing it. Maybe this is good for it to be decreased. And so that seemed okay. And many clinicians were saying they're good. However, what happened was that the data showed that the benefits of non-nutritive sweeteners in displacing calories was not working. And the reason for that is that when people were having a diet soda, say, then they were adding the French fries, then they were adding the potato chips. They were bizarrely adding those calories back by saying, well, I'm not having these calories, I'm going to add these other calories. And so that's what this 2013 study said. And on top of that, the interleukin-6 was finally understood that it actually was both pro and anti-inflammatory. And they found that the actual target for interleukin-6 was a very important modulator of actually how much food you did take in. And so they were very, very surprised about interleukin-6. Again, I want to remind us that here's what happened with aspartame, saccharin, and sucralose. It really depressed interleukin-6. And what ended up happening is they actually looked at mice that were what's called knockout mice, interleukin-6 knockout mice. That means that these mice could not respond to interleukin-6. And what happened to those interleukin-6 knockout mice that we would have expected would be sort of in an anti-inflammatory state? They spontaneously developed insulin resistance. They were stunned. And so then they said, we better figure out why that is. Why are these non-nutritive sweeteners causing these mice to all of a sudden become insulin resistant, which basically is type 2 diabetes? What happens is that interleukin-6 apparently is made both in adipose tissue and in your hypothalamus. And your hypothalamus controls all of your hormones and your satiety center. So it has a lot of regulatory impact, but it also appears to regulate body composition. In interleukin-6 knockout mice, they don't have the ability to even make interleukin-6. And what turned out to happen is that they are this left fat mouse here. They then took interleukin-6 that these mice could not make. They actually injected it into their brain, and the mouse became normal size. So they were able to show the mechanism of action is that interleukin-6 actually does this. It regulates body composition. So let's go back to that slide for a minute to see what happens. Here we are at regular white sugar. Here we are, which actually raised interleukin-6. And here we are at non-nutritive sweeteners, depressed interleukin-6, making the interleukin-6 group, the fat mouse, that's the non-nutritive sweeteners, and the sugar ones where I could actually make interleukin-6 have normal body composition. Now, I'm not an advocate of too much blood sugar, right? We don't want that. We already showed that high blood sugar is bad, but that's why we want to have not a no sugar diet, but the right sugar diet, because we do not want to have the obese mouse effect. So what is the actual solution? The actual solution is having enough protein, having low glycemic index carbohydrates, and bizarrely also having healthy fats, because that is literature what they call a high fat, low carb diet. And fat in nature always comes with protein. So this is why I was so interested and committed to having the right amount of protein, because all of the data is saying that you need 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of ideal body weight for keeping that homeostasis. It's why, and because 20 to 30 grams can be absorbed, digested and absorbed at one time. That is actually how come we came up with these numbers, because we had the results of that study. We knew that this was going to be critically important. We know that when you divide carbs by fiber and it's less than 10, and we have those right amount of sugar grams, then we know that we're going to make a difference. And that was critically important to us, especially because Brendan had done this work and Erica and I had worked on the study together. And that's why Erica is doing our study that we're doing now, because we really got that. We got that it's not a no carbohydrate diet. We got that we saw on those interleukin-6 mice that when we had, or in our case, we did organic cane sugar, that when we had some sugar, that we were going to have the right amount of interleukin-6. So we're going to balance out that carb fiber ratio. We're going to have our sugar grams less than 10. So our blood sugar did not go up. We didn't get too much insulin response, but we really want patients to read labels. And this is sometimes what happens when patients are like, well, I'm going to go gluten-free. Many gluten-free labels do not meet this carb fiber ratio, where when I divide carbs by dietary fiber, they are not less than 10. And when that happens, all of the carbs come out to be sugar grams. And when my sugar grams are over 10, then I can have too much of an insulin response. And the other thing is we want people to feel full. And when I have enough fiber, I'm going to have that feeling of fullness. When I'm full, that's going to tell me to not have cravings. And we know that we need healthy bacteria. And the literature on plant fiber as a great prebiotic is really important to grow the healthy bacteria. So there's sometimes people might eat yogurt and they're having the probiotics, they're having the lactobacillus acidophilus, they're having the bifidobacteria, but they're not feeding it any food. And those bacteria really need good quality prebiotics, which plant fiber is really, really good at. So we really want all these very good bacteria. The literature on lactobacillus and bifidobacteria and what they do for you are phenomenal. And what we don't want to get, especially, is these things like C. diff and other clostridiums, or having salmonella, or having the staph, that this is the one that causes staph infections that can go into your bone and into your skin. These are really problematic. Salmonella double bucket disease, where you're throwing up and you have diarrhea. And then Clostridium, very, very dangerous. It's called an anaerobic bacteria, and it just totally messes up the entire gut lining, because they actually start to damage the gut lining. If I damage the gut lining, now what's going to happen is I'm not going to be able to digest and absorb the food the way that I should. And I mean, the bacteria live in your large intestine. The main impact in the large intestine is to make a lot of vitamins for you, short chain fatty acids, and then also to do a bunch of water balance. So you don't really want to mess that up. We don't want to get a leaky gut. And now all of a sudden we're damaged this lining, and these bacteria are really starting to get into your system. So what happens is that there's very great evidence, and we'll do another presentation on this on the gut microbiome. Elizabeth and I will work on that. Healthy people have healthy gut bacteria. Healthy gut bacteria need food from fiber. What are the things they make? One, they make short chain fatty acids. That is the preferred fuel of intestinal cells, along with L-glutamine. That's good. That's high in any high good quality protein. It's high in chicken. It's high in bone broth. So that feeds the intestinal cells. That makes them happier. But short chain fatty acids are absorbed also and go to the liver and literally lower your cholesterol. It tells your body to make less bad cholesterol. Secondly, biotin's number one place that you make biotin is in your gut. We do know that you need it for good hair, skin, nails, but it turns out that biotin is necessary to metabolize all your macronutrients, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Also, the good bacteria make vitamin K. Vitamin K is very important for healthy bones and very important for the right blood clotting. So I clot when I need to, but I don't clot when I don't want to. And then I have a brand new recent paper, because we did the MTHFR talk, and it showed that the good microbiome can actually make the activated forms of folic acid and the activated form of B12. So when I have good quality B12 coming in, when I have leaves that have their own folic acid in them, I can actually convert it by those bacteria to those active folates that have all of those jobs that we talked about in the MTHFR presentation. And so this is just a really great thing that your body can do with it. And then the other thing that we also know is that what we want to be able to do is support my mitochondria so that I can burn carbohydrates and fats. Refined carbohydrates, if that's what I'm mainly eating, they completely lack the nutrition that fruits and vegetables deliver. And 40% of adult Americans are, and I don't know the number for kids offhand, do not actually get all of the vitamins and minerals they need because they are not eating fruits and vegetables. And that's really the place that fruits and vegetables come. So this is why we really like to have the vitamins with the fiber, because the body is experiencing it the way that it normally would come. Normally, vitamins and minerals would be part of fruits and vegetables. Now I put it in a plant-based product, and my body experiences it the way that it's meant to be taken in. And we just really believe we're having a better absorption and utilization of those vitamins and minerals by having them together. When I have more energy because I have those mitochondria, I'm going to burn more fat and more carbohydrate per exercise. I'm going to do better cell repair, and I'm going to have a better post-workout recovery. And because I'm writing this presentation now about sleep, what's so interesting is that when I'm more active during the day, I'm going to have a better night's sleep. But bizarrely, when I have the right vitamins and minerals, I'm actually going to make more melatonin, which is going to help me fall asleep. So super cool how that whole thing works together. What I made sure of, what we made sure of as the team, what we made sure of is that we did 100% of the B vitamins, B1, B2, B3, energy, B6, B9, B12, the methylators. They're the ones that get rid of homocysteine. They're the ones that do DNA and cell repair. So that is at 100%. But the one vitamin, when patients ask, that we did not put at 100%, because we want people to eat orange vegetables, to eat greens, anything that turns yellow has beta carotene in them. Beta carotene is a totally safe form of vitamin A. But in 2003, there was a great study that showed that at 200% of the RDA in susceptible individuals, vitamin A palmitate can increase the risk of bone demineralization. That made me really think about with the team, should we put in only beta carotene or should we put in some vitamin A? But the data is quite clear. Some people are not great vitamin A producers from beta carotene. So we're like, you know what? Let's have patients eat things like sweet potatoes, eat things like spinach and all green leafy vegetables, and get the beta carotene, which is going to really help them out. But we're going to put in some percentage of the vitamin A so that we can actually have their vision be really great. Because when you put in vitamin A palmitate together with vitamin E, then the risk of things like senile cataracts goes way down. It turns out that it actually is vitamin A and vitamin E together that actually helps delay the onset of senile cataracts. And so now people are going to have better night vision. They're going to be better able to drive at night. They're going to have better quality of life. They're going to see colors better in the dark light. So that's really why we put it in there. But we didn't want to put it in a high level so that even if you were to buy chance, like Susan or I had some people that were doing 2 shakes a day, we'd only be at 100%, not even. We'd be at 80 something percent. So they would be totally safe to have 2 in a day. Additionally, what we wanted to make sure is that everything was an absorbable form and that we would get the best benefits out of it. Intriguingly, when you have those other inflammatory cytokines like interleukin, 10, IL-1, IL-10, tumor necrosis factor alpha. Those all are really inflammatory, and people are quite inflamed today. They have too much of what's called omega-6 fatty acids to their omega-3 fatty acid ratios. And so the other thing we really wanted to do when we're talking about all the risks that obesity causes, we wanted to reduce the inflammation. because we know that inflammation is the cause of all chronic diseases, whether it's heart disease or cancer or migraines or arthritis. When I read the literature, what I realized was that the turmeric plus ginger combination, so here's our turmeric and ginger, it had the by far best data when they are together. It is not a 1+1 kind of ratio. It really was much higher than that. They were so synergistic that together they were way better than just adding one and one together. And then the cinnamon, what's so great about cinnamon is that cinnamon is really important for blood sugar handling, as is the mineral chromium. Chromium helps helps insulin bind to the cell, so it helps that glucose get out of your blood, which can be so damaging. Intriguingly, however, when you put cinnamon and ginger and cinnamon together, you get this really amazing anti-inflammatory impact. And when I started talking after we had formulated to my acupuncturist, it turns out that this particular combination is a 5,000-year-old Chinese medicine formula to reduce inflammation and treat all of these types of problems. But this is totally evidence-based. We picked these completely based on the literature where they use these to get rid of inflammatory cytokines and inflammatory markers. So what are our take-home messages here? Our take-home message is sleep 7 to 8 hours. That's how you're going to get that growth hormone. Exercise by just moving around 30 minutes a day, whether you're walking. There's even now this exercise called where you just talking about moving around and doing your housework and taking care of your kids and seeing patients or doing all the other work that we do. You just have to keep on moving. And then we want to have the right balance of protein, fiber, minerals, and antioxidants. And that way, we're really going to help balance our blood sugar handling.